can hear me, can you please tap onto your, just type into the keypad. Let me know you can hear me loud and clear. Thank you. Right, so I gave an assignment last week, and I'm happy a couple of you submitted. Thank you for all the hard work. Now, some of you understand perfectly, and I'm glad you do, but unfortunately some of you don't, and so I would seize this medium to explain exactly what I meant. So if you've done the first assignment, you would see that the first assignment was purely writing your test cases, which is obviously just a few steps. Your action on how to log onto the registration page, login page, basically on the GiftRead website, .com website. So within the assignment, a few of you, majority of you actually wrote those test cases nicely. But then the second assignment I said was to write just the registration page in Gherkin language. Now the reason I said that is because everyone who is doing testing, the main thing to understand, the fundamentals of testing is writing test cases. So you will get your requirements from the BA, and then you will now translate those into test cases after you've, of course, extracted your scenarios. So the basic thing is you need to understand how to write test cases, otherwise you can't even understand anything within testing if you can't write your test cases. And that's why I'm emphasizing that. So now I got a few responses to this assignment number 2, which is to write the test cases in Gherkin language, and I'm just gonna go through that briefly with you this evening. So first of all, when you talk about Gherkin language, what do you mean? It's just a way of defining test cases. It's very easy if you understand. So the same way you write your actions and you write your steps, naturally I will just call them steps, which is of course what you need to do. Actions in manual testing is the same way you write that in Gherkin language. Apparently Gherkin language, although is used more for automation, it can be used for manual. I'm a manual tester where I work, but what they give me, the requirement comes in given when then language, which I have to understand, because I understand, I know how to write the test cases for those, and I still test it manually, not even automation. So in essence, what I'm saying is that it's important that you understand how to write test cases. Majority of you do, some people don't, because from the assignment I could deduce, I think maybe I need to state this again, and that's why I'm going to go through this quickly before we start to do what we are supposed to do today. So what am I saying? First of all, if you are writing a Gherkin language, the first thing you need to understand is what you need to confirm. What do I need to confirm? And I said registration. So I said registration page, which is what do we want to confirm on the registration page, so that I'm logged in. I think if someone can remind me, the registration page that we did, what did I say? What's the confirmation there? What do we want to do, or what do we want to test? If someone can type into the notepad, I think it's just basically so that I'm registered or something like that. Yeah. Yes, it is valid registration. Okay. Yeah, valid registration is the title, is the scenario. Valid registration is the scenario, but what do we want to do so that I am registered? I think, is that the end result? Is that what do we want to test? I know we want to test valid registration, but I'm looking for a particular word. I think I said so all the steps, so basically all the manual steps that we did last week, which was basically click on the registration button, enter your username, enter your name, enter your email address. What's the end result? What did we want to achieve? I think we just wanted to achieve that we are so that I can use here. I need to register so that I can use the website. Exactly. So we need to register, yeah? So the end result is that so that I am registered. Yeah, and of course we know so that I am registered on the gift rates website. Something like that, yeah? Yeah, so now we know, going by this, we know that, okay, this is what we want to achieve. But then before we achieve this, what do we need to do? So what we need to do here, so this is just basically confirming what we need to do. And before we get to all this, before we get to the registration page, so that I'm registered, we have a list of actions that we need to do. Yeah? So that I am registered would now be the what? That would be the, so within your Gherkin language, this will now be the then I am registered. Because this is basically our action. I mean, this is basically our actual result. In manual testing, you will name this as your actual result. This is what we want to achieve. If I can spell. So this is what we want to achieve. But before we get to this step, we have to do so many things. Yeah, and those are our actions. And before the action as well, so the action will be what? I can't see the website, so I don't know, but I'll just start. I'll just say I'll use my example, some other example, yeah. The first thing here is my condition. It means this is where I'm starting from. Yeah, I'm starting from here. This is my condition, given I am on the home page. Of course, the home page I'm talking about is the gift rich. Yeah, we all understand that. So I just want you to understand, and that's what I'm trying to explain. So when I click on the search, it might be a search button. Maybe let's say I want to shop, so I want to do some shopping, for example. When I click on the search button, let me say I'm purchasing a chair, so I wouldn't use, no, this one I would just say so that I can then I can see. Let me just change this. So let's just say we are trying to order a chair here, for example. Yeah, so we are trying to order a chair, and I need to see this message. And of course, I would see this message when I've made my purchase, when I finish purchasing the chair. So this is actually my actual, this is the end result. This is my actual results. So if you've written those test cases I gave you initially last week, you would understand this, that this is my actual result. This is where we want to get to. But before we get to here, which is thank you for your order, I want to see that message displayed on my screen. Before I get to there, I need a couple of actions to perform. And so the actions are listed here. Yeah, so let me just take this out. So the actions are, I'm on the home page. When I click on search button and I search for a chair, yeah, and I add to basket, and I click on the payment, and I complete the payment, and I confirm, and I click on, okay, I complete the payment, I click on, and I click on confirm, yeah, confirm payment. So then, payment, then, so basically, this is what I want to achieve. If you understand from the beginning that this is what we want to achieve, your actual result is exactly what you want to achieve. Yeah, it's your end result. Is what you want to achieve. Is what you want to achieve. It's your actual result. So if you understand that that's what you're trying to test, then the other things will be your given is where you are starting from, your condition. It's just like saying you want to go to work. For example, you want to go to work today. So given you are already dressed up, or given you are leaving the house. So you had already woken up, you are going to work, you are leaving the house. How do you get to work? When you get on the train, and then you get on the 162 bus, then you click your pass if you have a pass, or you show the traffic warden your pass, or I don't know how you get to work. By the time you get to work is the then. So that's the action. So this is your this is the condition. All these are your actions to now get to your end result here, which is your confirmation to say yes, this is what we want to do. So if you understand this exactly the way I've explained it, you'll be able to write the Gherkin language very well, especially when it comes to the registration that I said to write. And I know a couple of you right now you'll be thinking, oh, you got it wrong. And I know. So what I'm just trying to say is that if you understand this properly, the condition is where you are starting. So it says, given I'm on the home page. So it means when you're on the home page, there's a search button on the home page. When you click on the search button, and then you search for a chair, and you add the chair you add it to the basket, and you click on the shopping basket, and you click on payment options, and I complete the payment. So all these are your actions. Actually, sorry, your action starts from here. All your and are your actions. So these are everything that you should be doing to get to this end result, which is the actual result, where we want to go to. So by the time you do all this, if you are able to write your scenarios in this, as a matter of fact, your BA might even write some scenarios like this, given when then. But you have to understand how to translate that into test cases, what you are testing for, what you are looking for. How do you confirm? You want to confirm that, oh, okay, you want to confirm that this is what you want to do. What do you want to get tested? And this is what you want to get tested. This is what you want to see at the end of the day. So once you know what you want to get tested, which is the most important thing, you now start writing how you want to test it. And the start is the condition, is the precondition. And all these are the actions to get to where what you want to test. So if you understand that, you can translate your test cases into Gherkin language. In most cases now, because most people are going agile without necessarily doing automation testing, most people who are going agile, this is how they write their test cases. And you as a test analyst, the most important thing you understand is your test cases. If you cannot understand how to write your test cases, you can't test. Because that's the starting, that's the foundation of testing. It's just to write clear, low-level test cases that anybody can pick up. Can you type in your, if you can type in your keypad, please. After the lecture, I will take any questions. So what I'm just trying to say is that you need to understand how this works. You need to understand the basics of testing. And the basics of testing is just this. how to write your test cases in Gherkin language. Right, I hope I've been able to explain this properly for someone. And I know some people know it, but at the same time, it's just best for me to lay the foundation so that at least I know and we understand this better. Yeah, now I can actually expatiate more on this. Now, within these scenarios, for example, this doesn't say, for example, when I click on search button, how do I know I've clicked successfully on the search button? This doesn't tell me anything. But of course, this is how we write it. You might write it in a more advanced way, but of course, by writing it that way, everyone understands even clearly. As in, you can actually define each, you can actually use this, the first one, which says when I click on the search button, you can actually use that as a scenario on its own if you want to expatiate more on this. And I know they call it backtrack and stuff like that. So this would just be like, okay, now this is what you want to test. This first one will be, oh, your scenario. So I can actually say, from this I can say scenario. Oh, if I can spell today. So my scenario would be search my scenario will be search for a product. Then I can say given so because I want to validate and I want to confirm that I've done this search button, for example, how do I know I've searched properly? Yeah, so I can say given the user is on the home page, when the user searches for what's the product that we want to do, the product here is what? The product here is still the chair we're talking about. Yeah? So this basically confirms, this is like a confirmation. I'll put this in brackets. So this is a confirmation to say, yes, we have searched. Yeah, so this is just basically doing this in a different way. Search for your chair in a different way without modeling everything together. Yeah, so basically, so when you say given the user is on the home page, which is your precondition, when the user searches for a chair, then the chair product should be displayed. That's your actual result, is your acceptance criteria if you are doing automation or if you are doing manual, when you write your user stories, yes. So that's basically it. So, but what I hope to see was on your registration page, given I am on the registration page, then you now write the processes, the steps that you've written already in your test cases that we did last week. You now write those test cases. Given I am on the registration page, when I click on, I think it's the name, and I enter my password, no, is it my email address, and I enter my password and and then I enter my username, I should be registered. The CAPTCHA doesn't matter. You can write the CAPTCHA in your test case as part of the assignment, but at the end of the day, we can't test CAPTCHA. So I hope I've been able to explain this very well to people, because I just want people to get the foundations, and test cases are so important. You need to understand test cases, how to write it in either language they bring, maybe plain, simple English, But because most people are going agile now, and we'll be doing most of this next week when we start the Azure DevOps, we'll be writing things like this. And it's not just logging into the GiftReach website that you'll be doing a lot of things once you log in. Once you are registered on the site, you can log in, you can search for a product, you can order a product, and all that. So there are so many things to do. And of course, if we are writing our language, our test cases, we need to be writing them like this. And that's why it's very important for me to explain to you guys, just for you to understand this. Okay, so I'm going to go to today's lecture. Thank you very much for attempting the assignment, and I'm really grateful for that. It shows that a lot of people understand, but for those who don't understand, I hope I've been able to make you understand. Right, so I'll go to today's lecture, if I can find my next screen, which is... Right, so today I am going to talk about, actually last week I spoke about, I was talking about the phases, the processes, phases of testing. I spoke about software testing development life cycle. I spoke about software testing life cycle. I spoke about the V model, a couple of methodologies that I mentioned. Then I mentioned system testing. I mentioned a couple of testing, basically. Now, for testing, we have various types of testing, and I think I'll be mentioning the majority, the few that we use. There is a lot of testing. There are about 500, no, actually, sorry, I lied. There are about up to 100 different types of testing, but the most commonly used ones, I'll be mentioning them today, if I have the time. Now, I just wanted to address something. So when we talk about test entry and test exit criteria, so the phases of testing that I taught last week, if you watch the video, I spoke about phases of testing, and at various phases there are entry criteria, for example. So you can't just get to work, for example, and then you start testing. No. You can't just get to work and then you start reading the requirements. No. You can't just get to work and then you start designing your test cases. No. You can't just get to work and you start writing your test reports. Close your report and reporting on number of test cases and stuff like that. There are stages in testing that you have to start from. So like I said before, depending on where you start, when you join the company, some people might join the company from the very beginning when they are starting to test. If they are starting the process of testing, that's very good. But in case you start whereby they've even finished doing the testing and yours is just to come and do the documentation, maybe the person who was doing the testing left and yours is just to come and do the documentation, you need to know what to do at what stage of testing that you meet them, be it agile methodology or waterfall methodology or V model. You need to know what to do whenever you get to the company. And that's why at this stage, this is important. It's important that I mentioned this. So at every stage of testing, for example, if you're at the requirement stage, so when you want to test, one of the processes that very first process is the requirements. So now, let's say, for example, the BA has finished writing the requirements. You've got your requirements. When we're talking about the entry criteria, for example, we have some prerequisites. We have some things we need to achieve before we can even start the testing process on its own. So say, for example, you get the requirement. Before you even get the requirement must be signed off if you are quite rigid. Some companies are rigid, some companies are flexible. But let's say the requirement is signed off, then you can now start looking at the requirements. That's when they have stated within their company SLA, company testing strategy, that the requirement must be signed off. Then once it's signed off, that's when you start. So what are you starting? That's when you now start analyzing your requirements. That's when you start looking at your requirements. So the entry criteria would be at the requirement stage. The entry criteria for you at that stage would be the requirement document. So you've gotten your requirement document, then you can now start testing. It's still part of testing. Then you can now start testing. One of the questions that will come into play when you start maybe looking for a testing job. They can ask you at every stage of testing, what is an entry, mention an entry or exit criteria at every stage of testing. I've been asked questions like that before. So at the requirement analysis stage, the requirement document is your entry criteria. That's your entry criteria into testing. You are starting to test at that time. So once you get your requirements, you start looking at the requirement document. You look at your requirement document, then at that stage there might be things that you need to deliver. Now, as a test analyst, you might not be the ones to deliver that. You might be the one to deliver it. But as a test analyst, you need to just know, because when you're doing your, sooner or later, if you decide to be a test analyst, it will be mandatory for you to take the ICEP foundation exams. And most of these things I'm talking about might come out in the foundation exams, and you need to know, although you might not be doing it on a day-to-day basis, but it's best for just knowledge that you know what you are doing from the beginning. And that's why I am taking time to explain this. Now, so as I was saying, the entry criteria will be your requirement document. So once you've got your requirement document, at that stage, you are planning. As soon as you get your requirement, you read through the requirement, that's the entry. You read through your requirements, you're not even saying anything, you're just reading through. Then at the test planning phase, your requirement is your entry criteria. Like I said, after the requirement analysis, is your requirement document, is still your requirement, is still your entry criteria. Then you have things, your exit criteria is you must have written things like test strategy, test plan, and of course, if you are the test lead, you will estimate an effort. And for you to estimate, you would have done at this stage, and this is why I gave you part of the assignment, was to write your scenarios. So at this stage of the entry, once you get your requirement documents, the thing you need to be, the artifacts you need to be, or metrics I will call them, are documents you need to deliver at that stage, is your test strategy, your test plan, and then your test effort. From your test scenarios, you'll be able to know how many test cases. Once you've written your test scenarios at this stage, you'll be able to know how many test cases that you will generate. And from that, you'll be able to do your test estimation. So the next phase would be, so for the planning phase, your requirement document and your test, I mean, that's your entry criteria. Your exit criteria is your test strategy, your test plan, and your test effort. But in most cases, the test analyst might not do the strategy. The test analyst might do the plan, but definitely the test analyst, if you are the only tester, you have to do your efforts, estimate your efforts. And the only way you estimate your effort is once you've written your scenarios, your test scenarios you wrote last week, and your test cases. You'll be able to estimate your effort, how long it will take you to test. Now, at the design stage, what are we doing? We are actually writing our test cases at the design stage. We're writing our test cases, we're creating the test data, we are writing the test scripts. Remember, at the test planning phase, all you've written is your test scenario. But from the scenario, you'll be able to say, oh, okay, maybe from this, just give a rough estimate. And like I said last week, it's best to overestimate than to underestimate. So when you come to your design phase, this is where you are designing your test cases. You are writing your test scripts. Well, of course, even if it's automation or manual, you are writing your test scripts. And then you are creating your test data in case you have to create it. Now, at this phase, you might not have anything in particular to deliver, but your deliverables here are your test cases and your test scripts. Somebody else might be doing the test data. In most cases, is a test engineer or some other maintenance department, depending on how the structure of your organization. But this is what the test analyst will be doing here, writing the test cases. And so once your test scripts are complete, say for example you want to move on to the next next phase of testing. You cannot move into test execution phase. This is what this is saying. You cannot move into this phase if you haven't completed this phase of testing. So let's say, for example, you don't have test cases. You can't now say, oh, test execution will take me 2 weeks, and then you are now writing your test cases. The test cases must have been ready, reviewed, because the BA sometimes needs to review the test cases. So the BA must have finished reviewing the test cases here, and then the test cases are just ready. So once you get to the execution stage, all you need to be doing is click on, this is manual testing. So all you need to be doing is executing those test cases at the execution stage. So if this stage is not complete, that's why it's the exit criteria. If you have not finished this stage, for example, especially the test scripts and your test cases, you cannot proceed to start to start executing test cases here. You cannot do that. And that's why this is so important, that this step must be completed before this. So for your test execution, of course, now you've written your test cases here, you've written your plan some people have test execution plan, test execution document, which is your how many test cases you want to execute on a daily basis. Depending on the number of resources, you can divide that. So you produce that here. That needs to be produced as well as the test cases, and the test scripts will be loaded onto the test management tool, which in this case is the Azure DevOps. Some people use Excel, some people use Jira. The test cases would have been loaded onto that particular tool before you can start test execution. So in most cases, you have your checkpoint meeting. And your checkpoint meeting, your project manager or your test manager wants to know, before you now start testing, maybe you want to start testing next week. This week, for example, by maybe Wednesday, you have a checkpoint meeting. They will be asking you in the checkpoint meeting, requirement document okay? Yes. Test cases okay? Yes. Test scripts loaded onto HPQC or loaded onto Jira? Yes. So that they know that when you come on Monday, all you need to do is to open your Azure DevOps and start executing the testing. Executing testing on your test environment, and then writing that, recording the results or running the test in your Azure DevOps. So your manager will not wait until Monday, for example, before they now start checking, are your test cases ready? Are your test scripts ready? Has it been signed off? Did the BA review? All that needs to have been done at the planning stage as well as the design stage. So especially your documents, they need to have been reviewed and everything ready. So at the execution stage, all you are doing at the execution stage is that your entry report for that is that your test plan document is ready, your test cases are ready, your test data, and then your test environment. This is now where you now start testing. So that's the entry criteria onto that. For you to enter into testing, you must have done your test plan document, you must have done your test case document, your test data, and your test environment must be ready. If your test environment is not ready, you cannot even test. So test data will be ready here, but test environment has to be ready before you can start, before you enter testing here. And now for you to exit this stage, you now need to have finished testing and then your test execution report. And your report, for you to say, I want to exit testing. When you finish testing, your report will contain things like how many tests passed, how many tests failed, how many tests was a no run, how many tests do I need to rerun. And of course, that will include your regression testing. We'll come to that in a minute. That will include how many retests you did, how many regression, how many failed, how many defects we have left, how many are open, how many are closed. So you have to write, here is a detailed report. Remember, you are reporting to the stakeholders. Even at every level of stage, at every stage of testing, there are various things that you report on. You have to report, for example, your manager will come to you and say, at the requirement stage, what are you doing? All that you are just doing here is analyzing the requirement. Yes, but how long will it take you? Then even at this phase, when you say, you've got your requirement document, okay, so can you estimate your test effort? So at every stage of testing, there is something you have to deliver and report on. Here, for example, your requirement analysis stage, you'll be reporting on the requirements and the scenarios. But then here, when you come here, you'll be reporting on your test plan if you are doing one and your test effort. And then the next phase, you'll be reporting on your test scripts. How many test scripts have you done? If the test data is ready. And if you feel you are ready for testing, for example. And then At the test execution stage, you'll be reporting the number of test cases you've tested, what failed, what passed, or you might even do a risk analysis, and of course that will be, how many defects do we have in a particular area, where are the defects concentrated and why. In case you know the functionality, you might be able to help the engineers even explain and stuff like that. So you need to know all that. Even at the defect, even here, you still need to now report the defect report. Oh, we have so many defects around this functionality. Why is that? Is it because this, that? Even when they say they fixed the defect and you've done a retest, you can still say, no, it's still open because, or you reopen the defect. As far as you are concerned, it's still open. So things like that is what you'll be reporting here at your test execution phase. So now the next phase is the closure phase. Now the closure phase will be, what are you reporting here at the closure phase? You are reporting your test execution. You've now done your test execution report, and now you'll now be reporting majorly on the defects. This is the entry criteria. You'll be reporting majorly on the defects. Remember I said last week that you, the test analyst, will put a severity on your defect. Here, you'll be assigning, you would have assigned your severity to your defect anyway. But then you now have to make sure how many defects are open. Reporting on the severity. Oh, severity defects, defect severity 1 and 2. Are they still open? Meanwhile, you shouldn't have any defects that are severity 1 and 2 open. It's only 3 and 4. So when by the time you finish testing, severity 1 and severity 2 defects, any defects you raised that are severity 1 and severity 2 should have been fixed. Then the 3 and 4, for example, you should have had a walk around that. And then, of course, with the walk around, you have to speak to it's not just your decision to decide the walk around, it's the business decision to decide the walk around defect severity 3 and defect severity 4. Now, when you now finish that, the next thing is to write your test closure report. The test closure report will just give a general overview of what happened during testing, how many defects that are left open, how many are left closed, and of course your recommendation as a test analyst, whether they should go live, whether you feel, oh yeah, the application is now okay, they can go live or not. Remember, as a test analyst, you can only give your recommendation. The business might decide, you know what, whether you like it or not, we are going live. It doesn't matter. But yours is to give your recommendation based on your test. So based on my test, I have maybe severity defect severity 1 and 2, for example, they've decided not to fix it. Say, for example, I should be logged onto the registration page, and and when I click on the registration button cannot open. It's giving me like an error 404, something like that, when I click on the registration button. And of course, that's like a critical defect or a high defect. It's either defect severity 1 or 2. You can't give it anything more than that. And then the department decided that they are not fixing that defect. It doesn't matter, we are going live with that defect. You as a test analyst, you have to listen to the business, because at the end of the day, the stakeholders are the ones paying you. However, you can only give your recommendation in the test closure report. You make a note of that defect to say, this is still open, this is your recommendation, we can't close testing. But if they decide to stop testing, because sometimes when you say to the business they can't stop testing, they usually feel, oh, you are the tester, especially if you are a contractor, they always feel, oh, you just want to make more money, you want to prolong testing. But of course, you have to give your justification and why you said they cannot go live. And if you say that, it's just your recommendation. They can now decide to go live. And of course, everyone, we know what would happen. By the time they go live and the defect shows up, they now start panicking. But you as a test analyst need to give your recommendation within your test closure report. You have to say what you recommend, whether they should go live or not. So last week we were talking about quite a few testings, and from what I have done in the past, there are some testings that are vital that you do on a day-to-day basis anywhere you go. So say for example you are employed in a company, you cannot be employed, and I've never seen it before, except please, if you have, especially those who are testing among you, if you have, let me know. So you cannot be a system tester in an organization and be the UAT tester. So if you are employed, for example, for a system tester, as a system tester, when you finish your system testing, they won't say to you, come and do UAT. So where I'm working at the moment, I'm the systems integration tester. I don't do UAT. I can write the test scripts for UAT. I can actually coordinate UAT, but I do not test UAT. I don't do UAT testing. The reason why I said that is some people would write on their CV that, oh, they are the system tester, they've done system testing in the same role. I didn't mean in two different roles, but in the same company, some people will say, I've done UAT testing and I'm doing the system testing, or I'm doing the system testing and then I'm doing the UAT testing. I don't think that's right. So if you're employed as a system testing, then you're the system tester. If you are employed as you can do system testing, and system integration testing, but you can't do system integration testing and UAT testing in the same role. Right, and why I said that was there are different types of testing that we have, and these are the most common testing that we do as test analysts. So depending on where you work, your organization will determine the type of testing and the type of method that you would use. So different types of companies will come with different types of testing. Say, for example, a company that is web-based, for example, let me say a charity organization, and majority of their company, what they do is to advertise to people. People should advertise on their website, for example. They reach out to people via the web. So majority of the testing that you'll be doing within that company would be web testing. You'll be testing their web, you'll be doing compatibility testing, you'll be doing browser testing. Because a lot of people will be logging onto their website from all over the world. And of course, you'll be doing a lot of browser compatibility, browser testing, cross-browser testing, compatibility testing and stuff like that. So depending on the organization that you are, your organization will determine, the type of organization will determine the type of testing. Also, another thing that will determine the type of testing also is the time available for test. So I said that simply because if I say time available for test, I'm thinking of something like a risk-based testing here. So depending if your organization has a lot of time to test, they can test priority test cases with priority 1 and 2, 3, 4. But if they don't have time for test, they will just test based on where they feel is the most risk-based areas. And that's the test they will focus on. They will just test the major functionalities and where they feel, oh, there will be a lot of risk here. If this fails, for example, this application will not work. So your company, depending on how big and depending on the time you have, that will determine the type of test that you test within an organization. Sometimes also the testing budget. The testing budget, they might just say, oh yeah, we've got only £10,000, and of course they will employ permanent staffs for all, or fixed-term staff for like 2-3 months, and then that's why you see some people, they will say 2 months contract. So it depends on the budget. Also determines, even if you're a contractor, sometimes they can say, oh, there's no more budget and there's nothing you can do. So that will determine the type of testing that the organization will do and the type of testing you as a test analyst will be doing for them. Okay, so acceptance testing. When we do acceptance testing, what do we mean? We test according to the business requirements. I'm sure majority of you know this. So we are testing mainly based on what the user wants. We are testing so the user might just say, oh, in a Word document, I want to close the application by using the X. I want to use a shortcut. I want to use, so the majority of the business testing that you will do as an acceptance test, majority of the testing that will be done is just what the user wants according to the business requirement. So the user has specified they don't want to close this application now. I don't want to go to file and close this application. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to close my application by using the X button. They've adapted it. That's what they want to do according to their business requirement. Now, in most cases, if you're doing an acceptance testing, that's quite different from a system test, and that's quite different from a system integration testing. When you're doing your system integration testing, I spoke about last week, you are testing the system functionality. How does that work? The core functionalities, you are testing how the system should function, how it should work. functionality of the system. But meanwhile, when you're doing the acceptance testing, you've tested the system for the functionality of the application. You are not necessarily testing the functionality of the application. You are just testing based on what the user wants. The software has to be delivered according to the user specification, to the business specification, to the business requirements. And also, when you're doing that, some people say alpha testing. When we say alpha testing, is a type of acceptance testing done in the business, in the user's environment. So you're actually doing this within the environment. You're doing this within the environment of the people who are using the software itself. Although it might be done by an outsider, but it's done by the clients. And it's done in the presence of the testers or in the presence of the developers. And in most cases, once you want to do this, some people will say, oh, can I have, if you have a third-party company, for example, and they've done their own testing for you, they will say they've done their own testing. You normally ask, can I have a copy of the test scripts that you ran? So they've run their own test scripts outside or somewhere else, and that's beta testing. They've done that in their beta testing. They've done that in their environment. You want the same test scripts, and you want to do that within where the application was developed, and that's alpha testing. You want to do that within your own environment. So the next one is the gamma testing. Gamma testing is when you do your testing done directly by skipping all the in-house testing activities. So this is usually done when the application is ready for release. And that's why you do gamma testing. All these things you can go and read up on your own, but I just wanted to touch them quickly. So risk-based testing was what I said initially. If we don't have time to do all the testing, to test all the priorities of testing, go through all the priority 1, 2, 3, and 4, we just ask, oh, where we just think, okay, we discuss where do we think the risk of this application, where do we think, what's most likely to fail, basically, what's important, what's most likely to fail, and we base our testing around that. And in most cases, it's usually those test cases with with priority 1 or priority 2. Maybe we have 2 weeks to test and we have a whole lot of test cases. We won't be looking at severity priority 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll be looking at 1 and 2 quickly. Just do the test quickly. So when we talk about regression testing, with regression testing, once you've done your testing and they fixed a defect, you need to do a regression testing. Regression testing is testing a functionality that has already been tested and passed due to a defect that you raised. So you raised a defect around the functionality. Say, for example, I'm testing my car, for example. Yeah, I'm testing my steering wheel. So I have already done my testing. My wheels passed. The wheels are the tires. Yeah, the tires passed. But then there's something on the steering wheel that failed. So now they've done the steering wheel. They fixed the defects, and I've now done the retest I've done my retest on my wheels. But then I now need to do the tires, do the regression testing on my tires. Why do we do regression testing? Because the functionality that they fixed, according to the functionality that they fixed, for example, the wheels that they fixed, might have, while fixing it, or because it's broken, might have affected something on the tires. So we now need to do a regression testing on the tires, and we do a retest on the wheel. So that's why we do regression testing. Retesting is just testing what has passed, what has failed, and they fixed the defect. They've come back to you to say, oh, it's been fixed. Yours is now to do a retest and verify whether it's really been fixed, or maybe whether it's not been fixed. So in most cases, when you do your testing and you raise defects and you do a retest, you have to do a regression test. So your regression pack, for example, you might be faced with the challenge of creating a regression pack where you work. When they've done a regression pack before, if they've done the project before, it's easy to do the regression pack. But when they haven't done the testing before, you are new to testing. Now, the only way you determine your regression pack, which is a few test cases that you gather to do a regression, the only way you determine your regression pack is you look at what has failed most recently, or what has failed, the area, the functionality that failed the most. So you test that, and you test everything surrounding it. So like I said in the example of my wheels, for example, you test your steering wheel. You might even have to test your gearbox because it's surrounding the steering wheel. So surrounding the steering wheel, then you test the wheel, and then you might even test the seats, maybe because it's close to the wheel, something like that. So you test the surrounding, you test that functionality that's broken the most, and the surrounding. When I say the surrounding, whatever it touches or whatever it works with. And that's how you determine your regression pack. But of course, if the regression pack has been determined before, if it's a company whereby the application has, they've already done the testing before, that wouldn't be a problem. But whereby you have to determine the regression pack, that's what you have to do. You have to test, look at where most of the defects were raised, and then what surrounds it, what it affects. So when we talk about, the next one is smoke testing. So when you develop an application, when an application is developed, is built initially by the developers, we always ask a question: was the application built properly? And how do we know whether it's built properly before you execute at all? So they built a website before, for example, and the website, when you log on to that website, you click the button, you click a submit button. Now that submit button should be submitting, maybe submit emails to an inbox, for example. They've just built the website. If you are doing something like a smoke testing, is a quick test quickly to make sure that the build you've received, maybe from the developer, is actually working, is testable. So I use that button example. For example, they've just built that button, that button. You need to just quickly do a quick test. If you click on the button and it says send email sent, for example, you now need to quickly go and log into email. We are not testing, you are just quickly making sure that the application that they built has been built according to specification and is working without necessarily doing all the tests. So you've created 100 tests. By the time you're doing a smoke test, you're just doing about 5 tests. And they are just mainly important tests. They will test around the core functionalities. They will quickly test the core functionality. The login button, for example, you can log in, that's fine. When you log in, I can click on this button, and I can actually do, if I click on that button, the email goes to, it integrates with the inbox. I can quickly check the inbox. Did I receive an email? Things like that. So you do, like, the smoke test is just a quick test. So in fact, in most cases, we don't even use test cases for smoke tests. We just do a quick check to say, okay, this is working. You know, say for example, you're on an e-commerce website. You can just click, okay, can I hack to basket quickly? Can I make a payment? So when you might not necessarily, can I make a payment? Click make a payment. What's the message that it says to me? Can I make a payment? Can I hack to my basket? Can I do something? Just do a few quick tests just to test the functionality, whether it's working or not, quickly. And that's why it's called smoke testing. And smoke testing is actually different from sanity testing. So you hear something like sanity testing. This is done during the release phase as well to check the main functionalities of the application without even going deeper. So with sanity test, the build might even be rejected with sanity test. In case any of it fail, you might even say, okay, we reject this. But it's a quick test as well. So whilst one is shallow, one is deep. But then they are both quick tests to just determine whether we've got the right application, whether the application was built according to the way it's been specified. Was the application, can it do some quick functionalities quickly, or can it do the search functionality, for example, within an e-commerce website? Searching is important. Can it do a search functionality? Can it do a payment flow, for example, without necessarily doing all your tests at the same time? So the next one I just want to run through. I wouldn't run through all of this. You guys can read up on all of this type of testing, and and you can read up on it. And also, I was going to say, apart from reading up, before I say that, so you can read up on all these type of testing. We've got compatibility testing, and that's just checking whether your application or your web browser is compatible with a particular website. You do some positive testing, like in the valid registration that we did. We will do a valid registration, and then we can now do an invalid registration as well. That will be a negative testing. Then we can do accessibility testing. Accessibility testing is just how the user would, the ease of navigating through your website, for example. That's the only example I can use with that. Is it easily accessible? Can you explore the website, or can you explore the application with ease? Can you explore it without? Some people will say, oh, this website is not user friendly. Some people will say, oh, this website is user friendly. So accessibility would be, how easy is it to access? How easy is it to access that website or that application, for example? Yeah, or even if you want to log in, you can log in easily. Is it easy for you to log in? Some websites, you go to their site or you go to the application, you are like, okay, so what do I do here? And you're using like forever to find the login button, or you are using forever, you don't even understand what they are trying to say on the website. So accessibility testing is easy. How easy is it? How easily accessible is the site? So also, usability testing is just to verify whether the application is user friendly. Is it comfortable? Are you comfortable? I mean, and if you're just navigating through the website, for example, the main focus of testing is just to check that the user understands how to operate the application or not. I mean, this website or not. Are you able to operate, to use that website as well? Is easy. Is actually, you can actually. I don't want to say you can actually easily confuse it with accessibility testing, but they are different, and you can read that off. So when you do migration testing, for example, you've moved one application one application from one database to another, and of course the application must be able to perform what it used to perform without changing anything. If it's like for like, for example, without changing anything, I've moved my website or my desktop application from this database because it's quite slow. I've moved it to another database because the other database is more robust and I want more space. This other website that I was, this other database that I was, is obscure, is obsolete. It means it's old and it's slow. When I click on something, it takes forever for it to open. So I've moved my database, my application, I've moved it to a different database, a more robust one. And of course, I want to be able to perform the same type of, I want to have the same permissions I had. I'm trying to remember one word at the same time. I'm trying to say my legacy, is a legacy. So you've moved it from an old one to like a legacy database. So you've moved it from where it used to be to a legacy database. And of course, the legacy database needs to perform more, needs to be quicker. You need to see an improvement. And of course, you do all the testing. So it means that what you used to do on the old database, you want to now do it on the new database without affecting and changing anything. So your localization testing would be, you know what, I think you should read localization testing. Read localization testing, and that's part of the assignment. Read the remaining type of testing: localization, globalization, API testing, GUI testing, which is graphical user interface. Read that. That's part of your assignment for next week. And also read on the various types of testing, because I can't stress this enough, you would need to understand the types of testing. Not that you'll be doing majority of this testing. A couple of testing that I've even mentioned here, I haven't done in my years of testing. However, it's just best to know them just in case, to understand what it means. So And like I said, there are over 100 different types of testing that you need to learn and understand. And also, I would want to emphasize before I go on, there are testing terminologies that we use as testers. There are testing terminologies that we use as testers, and we need to start learning testing terminologies. It's quite important for us to test. I mean, if we want to become a tester, yes. If you don't want to be, of course, I'm just saying, for those of you who want to learn testing and do testing as a profession, there are some terminologies that you need to use as a test analyst or as a software tester. Is the day-to-day terminologies that we need to use. Okay. So I would want to talk again. So part of the assignment is that, and I'll give you another assignment this week. No, actually, I've given you the assignment. Sorry, the assignment is to go and learn the different types of testing. And please, I will say stick to Guru 99. I love to use Guru 99. Because Guru 99 is verified. I can verify Guru 99. On other websites, you might see other types of testing, which would end up confusing you. You don't want to be confused, especially when you're trying to learn something. So, the defect management process. Before I go into that, I think let me just address, I'll break this now. I will address a few questions. I will answer a few questions, then once I answer the questions, then I'll go to the defect management process. So because what I've said now about test entry and exit criteria and about the types of testing that we have and about the Gherkin language, I know a few people have some few questions. Right, so I'll just quickly run through the question. Sorry, screen is blank. Okay. Okay. Okay, so someone said, how do we, Gherkin is more acceptance criteria. How do we then translate the criteria into test cases since all our when are actions? Okay, so you do not, so your criteria basically, your criteria, like you said, is the acceptance criteria. All the when is not just all the when. Given is your condition, like I explained. Part of the when is part of your action. So it's not all the when. And if you notice, your first what's it called? Your first action is when. When I click on, that's an action. The other actions are the and. Then the last criteria is the then. So it's just like you're doing, what's it called? Like you're writing your manual test cases, like I explained before. All your actions, you are trying to get to work. How you get to work are your actions. Is when you get to work, that is your criteria. Is when you get to work, that is your criteria. Acceptance criteria, like you said. So how do we then translate the criteria? How do we then translate the criteria? I'm trying to read and somebody's typing, so I can't see the question very well. It's going up and down. So how do we then translate the criteria into test cases? Your criteria is the then. Then I'm at London. That's your that's your end result. That's your actual result. So I don't understand when you say translate it into test cases. What you translate it into your test cases are the actions, your actions that you perform to get to where you want to get to work. There are some actions. So all those actions, how do you get to work? Those are your test cases and those are your actions. But then the then is the acceptance criteria. You have now finished. Then I can see the registration page. That's it. That's your then. Is your action. That's what we want to test. We now know that that's what we want to test. And of course, how do we now get there is all those actions that we now write as our and or when, same. Right, next question was at what phase at what phase of testing do you plan your test environment? How do so you don't plan your test environment, you create your test environment. You as a test analyst might not even plan your test environment. Remember, the developers, in most cases, they will have to build your test environment. So it's at the planning phase. When you start planning, when you know what you want to test, they now know what sort of environment. You only get your test environment shortly at the design phase. The test environment must be ready, because without the test environment, you can't even create the test data. So if you are designing your test data, obviously your test environment will be ready. But you, the test analyst, might even get it shortly before you start testing your test execution, depending. But in most cases, some people get it earlier at the design stage. You can now use your test environment to now confirm your test cases. So the next question was, I think accessibility. Yes, you are right. I think accessibility testing is being accessible to disabled and disabled people. Is the ease of access. It might not necessarily be disabled people. Okay. Is it because it says accessibility? Okay, yeah, you might be right. Thanks for correcting me. I think I was wrong with that. Yeah. So usability testing is how easy it is to navigate around the website, whilst accessibility testing is mainly for blind people, people who are visually impaired, who are physically impaired, or have hearing impairment and stuff like that. Yes, so you are right. Thanks for that. So who writes the test plan? The test plan is usually written by the test lead or test manager. However, your role might be an hybrid role. I've worked in a place whereby I was a tester and I was a test lead. And in my current role, I'm the only tester and I'm the test lead. So I'll write the test plan. But in most cases, it's usually written by the test manager or the test lead, depending on how big the organization is. Who carries out non-functional testing? So non-functional testing, you as a test analyst can do some non-functional testing where there is no tool involved. So say, for example, if you are doing a test of a website and your website is taking forever to load. It's load testing, but of course you are doing it manually. It means you are quickly checking, oh, how long does it take to load? The performance of this website is not even up to standard. You might time it and stuff like that. But of course, someone who does a performance tester would actually do the performance using a tool, for example. And of course, that's non-functional testing. So is system testing same as end-to-end testing? You can say it is. However, end-to-end testing will test a user journey from the beginning to the end. As in, what would I do if I'm a user? But system testing will test the functionality of the system. You can quote me, I might say it's not the same, and I can say it's the same. To be honest, I don't know, but because once you are doing a system test, you might actually be doing an end-to-end testing just to see how the system works. But end-to-end testing will be to test the user journey from the beginning to the end, or replicate the user journeys. So test managers and test analysts write test plans depending on the organization. It is mostly by test managers. Okay, someone is just answering the question. Do you need to understand Gherkin to be able to get a job? Yes. So I cannot emphasize this enough. You need to understand the Gherkin language to not really. However, some people will ask for, if you put Gherkin language on your CV is good. At the same time, the fundamentals of testing these days, because testing is evolving, we have different types of testing. Every time new things being developed. You don't want to, so you need to understand Gherkin language because it's one of the languages that people do now, as in that people use now, especially when you are using DevOps. Most people will write their requirements now in Gherkin language, and if they give you a Gherkin language given when then and you don't understand, you don't even know how to now write the test cases for that, how do you want to test? So yes, I would say it is compulsory to understand Gherkin language as a manual tester. So I think I've answered all the questions. I haven't. Okay. So since I can't see any other question, I would I'm just trying to see where I stopped so that next time I stopped now with 9:13. Okay. Right. Okay. So my okay. So I've just got a question. Quickly, I will answer this. Who sets priority and severity? Like I said before, this priority is set by the business analyst. The priority comes with the test cases. High, medium, low. Depending on what they use. They might use critical, high, medium, low. And you as a test analyst, you cannot change that. So if a test case comes and the priority is must have, it means it's priority 1. Could have, 2, should have, then no, must have, should have, could have, and then, or maybe 4. I don't know what they call that one. Anyway, Moscow. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say is that if the priority is set by the BA, you cannot change that. So if the BA puts the requirement priority 1, when you write test cases for that requirement, remember you are writing your test scenario. Even your test scenarios, if you are going to put priority with it, it will carry the same priority that comes with the requirement. When you write test cases for those, if you write 10 test cases for one requirement, all those test cases are priority 1. You cannot change it. However, because the priority is the impact of that application, that functionality to the business, but then the severity is set by you, the test analyst, and the severity of the defect is the impact of that defect on the application or that functionality that you are testing. So you set the severity, you the test analyst, and the only time you talk about severity is only when you talk about defects. Severity relates to defects, whilst priority relates to test cases or test cases. We don't write requirement, we only analyze the requirement. So priority refers to the test cases, while the severity refers to the defect. The only time you talk about severity is when you raise defects. You have to give it a severity. I hope that answers your question. Right, so defect management. So when we talk about the defect management process, what do we mean? We have a process within an organization. So before you start testing, you would have written a test plan. And within your test plan, you have to have a process laid down. You have to have a defect process that you have to lay down. So we have a process within every organization, if you're a testing organization, for detecting defects and for fixing them. Now, because we have a lot of defects whenever we test, the same way we have to organize how we have to fix these defects. Say, for example, you start testing and you get 100 defects, and all the defects are, you've given them severity 1, for example. How do you test that? I mean, sorry, not how do you test. How do you fix that? So if you've already laid down in your test plan how you want to go about fixing your defect, it wouldn't be a problem. But if you haven't laid down how you want to fix your defect, it will be a problem. And I said that because when you raise a defect and you give it defect severity 1, how long does it take the engineer to fix it? Do they fix it immediately, or do they fix it 2 days later, or do they just say it's a change request? A change request will be where they need to change something to be able to fix that particular defect. Is it a change request? What process does that go through? So because that might that might impact the deadline assigned to your project. So when you are fixing when you want to, so basically the process that you need to go through when fixing your when the defect process would be, first of all, when you discover your defect. When you discover your defect, you look at the defect, you have to be certain that it's actually a defect, then you categorize your defect. Once you discover the defect, you have to see, oh, can I replicate this defect? You ask yourself different questions. Is it a defect that has been raised before? Can I replicate this defect, or I can't replicate it? Once you can't replicate it, then you leave it. It's not a defect. Of course, you might write it down and you say, but in most cases, you know that defect, if you can't replicate it, there's no point. It means you wouldn't be able to say, oh yes, it's a defect categorically, because you can't reproduce it. But then if you can reproduce it, fine. You've made the discovery. The next thing you do is you categorize the defect. When you are categorizing it, you're categorizing it in which? This is when you categorize in that severity. This is where you mention your severity of the defect based on the categorization laid down by the company. Some company would use severity 1, which will say high. Some will say not too high, or some will say not so low, or lesser than low. It depends on how they categorize it. But the main one that people use is the high, medium, low. Critical, high, medium, low. So you do your defect categorization. Now, once you categorize that defect, you now start talking about resolution. How would that defect be resolved? Depending on your organization, your developers might be the ones fixing your defects, or you might have a third-party company outside somewhere, and they have to fix the defect for the application they develop. So what sort of communication? Do you fix them? Do you put them within your test management tool? Do you give them licenses within your test management tool, so that when you assign the defect to them, you can assign it via HPQC or via DevOps, or do you have to send an email to them separately because they don't have permissions to use your own defect management tool, or do they have a tool in their own organization that they will have to allow you have access to? So all that would be basically, just to verify that, all that will be basically what you would have laid down before you even start testing. The defect management process has to be laid down before testing, so that everyone would know what to do once you start raising defect. You don't want to start raising defect and start asking questions. Oh, who does this defect go to? If I get a defect within this area, maybe you have different functionalities you are testing. If I get a defect within the wheel functionality, for example, or within the website, within the page, who do I direct it to? You won't be asking questions. You should already know, because that should be in the plan, that you should already know that you are assigning this defect to a particular person or a particular organization or an in-house developer or something like that. So the defect categorization would help you prioritize those tasks. It will help you prioritize what tasks, when I say prioritize, I meant severity. But of course, in other words, you are prioritizing according to your severity. It will make you prioritize the tasks. For example, if you are logging onto a website, for example, and the website performance is slow, you would know whether the website performance is slow. That's not critical, for example. But if you know that the login, for example, you can't log in, the login functionality does not work properly, you will know that's critical. So your categorization is very, very important, because that would help you prioritize what defects should be fixed first. And of course, within that, you would have stipulated before, within your test plan, that depending on your categorization, defect severity 1, for example, will take 2 days to fix, or defect severity 1, for example, will take 1 day to fix, or defect a showstopper, for example, will have to be fixed immediately. And you can find out what a showstopper means. Right. So verification. So when you want to do your resolution. Which one was I talking about? So when you want to resolve your defect, how do you resolve your defect? Who fixes the defect? What schedule fixes do we have for a defect? Is it the development team? And when they fix the defect, how do we report the resolution for the defect? Do they report to you verbally, or do they get back to you via email, or do you create a defect there's this thing they call a defect. I like to create a defect snag list. It's actually very easy for me to track the defects, apart from tracking it within my tool. Say for example, I organize a defect triage meeting, for example. You will organize a defect triage meeting. Maybe you want to talk about the defects every other day, depending on how many defects you have. So you would have labeled your defect number 1. You give a brief description about the defect, severity, status of it, is it open, then testers comment, has it been fixed or not, testers comment, all that quickly on the spreadsheet, so that by the time you are talking within the meeting, you know what you are talking about, instead of you logging in to be looking at something quite cumbersome. But I normally, it depends on what works for you, but I normally just create a defect snag list, quickly write the defects, give a brief description, and have a status for it. Is it open? And even if it's been fixed, what are they saying about it? So at least I can quickly look at my spreadsheet and I understand without even going into the defect management tool. So your verification at this stage, we have to be reporting on what's been fixed, and you have to be reporting on what's been fixed. And then once it's been fixed, you now have to do a retest. So your verification will be to do a retest of the defect that they said they fixed. So you need to verify, as a test analyst, you need to verify, oh, has this defect been fixed? Has it been fixed? Am I satisfied with the fix? When you are satisfied with the fix, of course, you do your retest, your regression, wherever you want to do it, and you close the defect. In some organizations, you, the test analyst, might not be able to close up a defect. It might be the manager who will close the defect. But then if you are able to close the defect, you are satisfied that, oh, the defect has done everything it should. I mean, the retest has been done and it's passed again. Then at this stage, you verify the defect before you go to the next stage, which is closing the defect. So the next one, which is the closure. Yeah, this is where once it's been verified as resolved, they say this resolved. At the verification stage, if they fix the defects and you are not satisfied, the functionality of that application is not working according to how it should work, you can actually reopen that defect. So within your defect categorization, there will be things like open status, like open when you open a defect, fixed, close, retest, reopen. So once you verify and you are not satisfied with the fix that has been given, because remember, sometimes the developers will think they fixed something, and you as a test analyst, once you go and verify, you now realize, it's not even working, or it's working partially, something like that. So at this verification stage, you can either reject it back to say, no, it hasn't been, I can't verify, and of course it goes back to the reopen stage. Or once it's been verified, it comes here to the closure. You close it, and of course you report. By the time you get to your test closure, within your test closure report, you give a report of how many defects have been opened, how many were closed, how many are left open, how many is a change request. That means we can't fix it now, or we need to develop a functionality for next time, or how many will be fixed in the next phase, and stuff like that. Or how many will be deferred, how many would we do, So within that reporting stage, you will talk about what's been deferred, what's still open, and what stage it's at. But one thing you should always remember, that you cannot close up testing. As a test analyst, you cannot close up testing. You cannot say you finished testing if you have defect severity 1 and defect severity 2 open. When you get to this stage of closure or reporting, once you finish testing, you shouldn't have defect severity 1 and defect severity 2 open. Now, even with the defect severity 3 and the defect severity 4, you should have agreed a workaround with the stakeholders before you can say, yes, all the defects are closed. So even if they are not saying anything about the defect, you need to be asking what's the status of the defect. You need to know. So when you organize your defect triage meeting, it might be on a daily basis, it might be during your stand-up. Some people incorporate it into the stand-up, but of course the stand-up, when you're doing an agile methodology, is just for you to come in and say, oh, this is what I've done today, this is what I've done yesterday, and this is what I think, this is what I'm doing today, this is what I did yesterday. But your defect triage meeting is a different meeting, because the defect triage meeting will take a longer time. You need to understand the status of each defect. Where are we at this stage? When are they fixing it? So what is wrong with it now? what's going on. If they say they fixed it, okay, then you can do the retest. You mark it off you mark it as a retest on your spreadsheet, or mark it as a retest on your defect management tool, or your test management tool, defect management tool. So you write it as that, note it down. So you need to know that if you have defect severity 1, defect severity 2, you cannot say, yeah, you finish testing and leave those defects open. They need to fix 1 and 2. 3 and 4, they need to find a work around it, and they need to let you know there's a workaround before you say, okay, yeah, we finish testing. Okay, so I don't know if I've come to the end of my slide. If I have, right, so any questions at all at this stage? If you have any questions, please type them into the keypad. So I'm looking at the questions again at this moment, and yeah, okay. So, okay, talking about defect. So I'm answering a question now, talking about defect. When a defect is discovered by a tester working in a team of other testers, do you keep the defect to yourself? The answer to that is no. How do you ensure someone else doesn't raise the defect? This is a very good question, actually. So how do you ensure that someone else doesn't raise the defect and take credit for your work? Does it matter if you're working as a team? Yeah. Okay. So as a test analyst, so many testers will be working on maybe the same functionality depending on how big the functionality is. They might just take, okay, you test the car, or even if you're testing the two things or testing the website together, yes. So when you raise your defect, you have a defect management tool that you log your defect into. Everyone logs that defect. Everyone has access to that test management tool. And it means all those testers can actually see. So one of the things you'll be looking at is, if you want to raise a defect, you have to check that the defect hasn't been raised before. You cannot be duplicating defects. If you've raised the defect before, we have a log. So usually within the defect management tool, you have the name of the person who raised the defect. So say, for example, I have raised the defect before, and then you now want to raise the same defect. If me, as a test manager, if I go through the defect, I would see that, this defect was raised at what time, because it has a timestamp as well. So I would see that, oh, this has a timestamp on, the defect has a timestamp. It was raised yesterday at 9 o'clock. How come somebody is now raising it same yesterday at 2 o'clock? So I will label the second one as a duplicate. So one of your roles to do, what you need to do once you are raising a defect, is to make sure that the defect has not been raised before. You don't want to be duplicating people's defects. So if you duplicate people's defect, for example, is the first one that has been raised, the first person that raised it, because it has a timestamp, that will take the credit for it, not the second person. Even though you are working as a team, yes. So on what basis of testing do you have defect management process in place? On what phases? On what phase of testing? So during your planning phase, you have your test defect management process in place. Remember the test plan. The test plan, I said this, I think, at the very first lecture that I had. I mentioned test plan. So within your test plan, there are so many things. Remember, test plan is planning. How long will the testing take? Who is testing what? What is the role and responsibility of the BA, for example? What is the role and responsibility of the tester? What is the role and responsibility of the developer? If the developers are two, who is taking care of what functionality, or who is doing the next functionality? So within that, you have your defect management process in place. So here you'll be talking about defect severity 1, defect severity 2, how long it will take them to fix it, defect severity 3, defect severity 4, what would happen? Would you have to have a workaround agreed? You would have stated all that within your test plan. So the test plan is just the guide, is what you have to adhere to, what is in scope and what is out of scope of testing, what functionality you are testing, how long it will take you to test, What stages of testing, type of testing. We are doing system tests within this week and next week. We are doing UAT tests this week and next week. Or we are doing, after system tests, we now start the UAT test, and who's responsible for that within the business, who is testing which functionality, who is testing what application, what defect management process we have in place, when we can close testing and stuff like that. So a lot of things would have been within the test plan. So this phase where we talk about defects and defect management process and everything within the company, because it varies from company to company, is at the planning stage and it's in the test plan. So the next question, I hope that answers your question. So the next question is, what is a workaround? Is that an understand? Oh, okay, I was reading that. Somebody just typed, is that okay, what was I reading? Is that an understanding and an agreement as to when the defect will be fixed? No. So a workaround would be, okay, we have a defect 1 and 2, we have fixed it. Defect 3, we can't fix it. Defect 3, we can't fix it. Defect 4, we can't fix it. The workaround would be, instead of, say for example, instead of clicking the X button, what can we do? So the business would know that although the requirement says they must be able to log on to the registration page, clicking on the registration button. If you click on the registration button, we need to register before we can get to the registration page. Because that functionality is not working, we can now say, let's click on the red button instead. So we have to have a workaround, something different from what we originally planned. Something different from what we originally specified in the requirements. So we have a workaround it. But the workaround needs to be agreed by the business and the stakeholders before we can say yes. Simply because sometimes they might not be able to fix that defect because it's severity 3 and 4. They might not be able to fix it at that particular time. It might be something it might be that they need to fix another functionality, or they need to do another change request, or build another function for them to be able to do that. So of course they will defer that, but while they are deferring it to the next phase of testing or the next phase of development, they need to agree on how to use the application, how to use that functionality now. And that is when they agree on a workaround. They have to find a workaround that particular defect. And in most cases, the defect defined the workaround at the defect severity 3 and defect severity 4, not 1 and 2. 1 and 2 needs to be fixed. Or sometimes the business might just decide, you said this is 1, you said this is 2, you are the test analyst, you've set the severity. They can now decide, let's put it to low. They can do that. And once they do that, remember, they are the stakeholders. They have every right to do whatever they want. So test management tool and defect management tools, are they the same? Do they perform the same function? No. Your test management tools, so some organizations will use the same tool as your test management and your defect management tool. Azure DevOps is an example. You can keep your defect on there. But some organizations will purchase 2 different applications, for example, TestRail and Jira, and they can be integrated. Some of them you would, once you have your test cases in there and you run your test case and it fails, by the time you click on something defect, it will take you to the next tool, which is the Jira. I've worked in a place whereby TestRail was linked with Jira. So you create your test cases in TestRail and then you go and raise your defect in Jira. However, the DevOps that we'll be using, it's just one tool. But the one tool, which is your test management tool, is the same tool as your defect management tool. So you can put your test cases in there, manage your test cases, at the same time manage your defects. So who usually ascertains, I've answered this question, but I will say it again. Who usually ascertains the severity of a defect? Sorry, hold on 1 second, please. Sorry about that. Yeah, so who ascertains the priority? I think someone has answered that. Thank you very much for answering that for me. Priority BA severity tester. Thank you very much. So that answers your question. When they say a software can never be free of defects, should there be a number of defects a tester must find? And at what stage would you stop finding defects? There's no amount. So we as test analysts, the more I find defects, the better I sleep at night. We as test analysts, our role is to find defects. If you don't find defects in an application at work, you should be worried, simply because there should always be a defect. So let's say they've employed you now, for example, and you haven't found the defect in an application. They'll be wondering, why do we need a tester? So because you're a test analyst, you think outside the box, you can imagine things, you have an eye for details and stuff like that. You must find defects. There's no number of defects that we have to find, but we must find defects. Our role there is to find defects and to prove that the application does not work. So you have to have an attitude that you want to break. You have to go in as a tester with an attitude that you want to break the software. And you have to try everything humanly possible to break the software. So just go on be like a detective, go on the lookout for defects. And that's what we do. We have to make sure we found the defects, because it's compulsory if we find defects. Otherwise, they'll just tell us, one day they'll just wake up and say go. They don't need a tester anymore if they feel the application doesn't need to be tested, simply because there are no defects. So it's good to find the defects. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, I would have to call it a day. And I have given 2 assignments. How do you include Gherkin on your CV? We treat it at the fair. Yeah, we'll treat that at the fair, because remember we still have the fair where we'll be treating how to write CVs. So we will treat that at the fair. We'll tell you how to write your CV and stuff like that. How do you install Gherkin? Gherkin is actually not an application. It's a language. It's a language that we use. It is not an application. So it's a language. So I don't think we can be installing Gherkin. Okay, if there are no other questions, I would will you upload the fair talks on platforms? Sorry, how do you mean? Well, I don't understand the last question. Sorry, I don't want to mention your name, but I don't understand. Yeah, we would no, we will not do that. So anything we do at the fair, we would not do that. It's a career fair and we cannot record the career fair. That's why it depends. If you want to be part of this testing and you want to take an advantage of this, I think you have to come to the fair. We cannot do any recordings for the fair at all. There'll be so many things going on. So many people will come with installations and stuff like that, you know. So we can't be recording all that. Okay, I've asked to say, yeah, so the assignment is simple. All I said was go and learn. So there are various types of testing. I've only mentioned a few and I didn't go through all of them, but you can go and learn various types of testing, and please use Guru 99, and there's another good website, softwaretestinghelp.com. Those are the 2 websites I would recommend. And also the second assignment, I said we need to start learning how to use the terminologies. We have various testing terminologies that we need to use. I think it's on Guru 99 as well, or Software Testing Help, or softwaretestinghelp.com. Yeah, so software testing. Oh, okay, I was just going to write that down so everybody will see that. Softwaretestinghelp.com or Guru99.com. Those are the two websites I normally prescribe for people. Okay. Yes, to be fair, I think yes, you are supposed to come with your laptop. You are supposed to come with your laptop. Otherwise, if there's anything, we will let you know. We will let you know before the time. Yes. Okay. In the absence of any other thing, I would like to call it a day. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you've learned a lot today. And I've learned a lot too. Accessibility testing. Thank you very much, the person that corrected me. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.